What's up, everyone? Welcome to another installment of the Deep Listening series. This week we have one of my best friends and favorite musicians and songwriters, Peachcurls, who I know as TJ. He has many different names, which we all go over in the beginning of the video here. But Peachcurls is an extremely prolific artist and musician, and someone that I really look up to, and that has inspired me a lot to come forward with my artistry. One thing I really admire about him is his authenticity in all his work, and his ability to just really lead with his heart and communicate really openly about what he's feeling. So yeah, we get into a lot of deep stuff in this conversation. It was really good, and I learned a lot from it. We get into the very real fear that a lot of Black Americans live with, just trying to live a normal life here. The fear of encountering things with law enforcement. The fear of having basic needs met. We also go, TJ goes into pretty full depth of the history of the Black experience here, and how these nitty gritty details of what slavery actually looked like have been largely left out of the historical education, and we're just now starting to come to terms with that. And then we also get into a little bit of how this Black experience is condensed into his artistry as a musician. And having said that, I would highly suggest checking out any musical projects that TJ has done, as they all come straight from the heart and hit you straight in the heart. So the best way to do that would be to follow Peachcurls on Instagram, and search him on any streaming service, and I will put a link to his Bandcamp store in the episode description here. So yeah, without further ado, enjoy the conversation. I hope you learned as well, and here we go. Thanks.
No, I just want y'all to know how hard it is not for me to pick my nose on camera, bro. Like I've been quarantined for 6 months. You know what I mean? So like I just been willy nilly picking my nose. So I gotta remember when I'm being watched. You
Yeah,
feel me?
the habits. I feel like there's acceptable ways though. Like if you're just kind of mid sentence and you just kind of do one of these, where you get a little beneath the rim, you just got to get something out.
No,
People.
but they notice though. People notice that, man.
uh, true. So yeah, with that, we'll go ahead and start here. So if you could just take a moment, everyone, to close your eyes and just find a seated posture where you can be a little still for a moment. So as that stillness comes in, turn your attention towards your breath. And allow for a few deeper breaths to happen in through the nostrils. So notice what is happening in the mind right now, what you're feeling in your body. Just a few moments to come into a fuller present moment awareness. So we can take this time that we're collectively sharing to deepen in this ability to listen to each other, to empathize, to hold space for each other's experiences. So you can just set a brief intention to do that right now. And take one more long breath. And exhale and open the eyes. And we'll get the convo going here. TJ, did you slip in a nose pick while our eyes were closed?
Never. You feel me? Y'all ain't about to catch me slipping. If ain't nobody was watching, the camera was watching. You know what I'm saying? I got to
Therefore,
keep
the
my
government.
there, and therefore, you know what I'm saying? That's the last thing I need for Donald Trump to be like, look, that guy picks his nose. I'm running for president. No, I'm just bullshit. What's up? What's up, though, man? You know what I mean? How you living?
How am I living? Well,
Yeah.
man, it's been an interesting few weeks sitting with all this and just educating myself on deeper levels of the history in this country and what race relations look like right now, what systemic racism looks like right now. So it's blown my head open a lot in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Real quick, I was about to say during the meditation or whatever, fucking dog started barking and shit.
Oh.
Had to. This house is crazy, man. And I just found out I'm an introvert. Well, I mean, I kind of already knew I was an introvert, but I just found out that I'm an IF, whatever. You know, the Myers Briggs. You feel me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you wanna know what my results are?
Hey, if you want to share that, man.
Yeah, let me let y'all know how I'm coming. Just so y'all know, I'm a Leo.
Well, let's see. Leos are like this and this.
You feel me? No, I'm a ISFP-T. So introverted, observant motherfucker, and I'm turbulent. So it means I care a lot about what people think. 78% turbulent. Isn't that crazy?
78%.
Yeah, it also means that like my fulfillment comes from like self-improvement and shit. Like turbulent over assertive like personalities typically feel like they need to constantly improve themselves, whatever that means.
Yeah.
You know.
I've also seen you at higher percentage of turbulences before.
Yeah, man. The turbulence is real, man. Troubled soul. So needless to say, me being turbulent in these turbulent times, you dig, it's been tough, man.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even lie to you. Like, I mean, like, I don't know. Like, uh, you want to get right into it, get
It,
right, like
it,
right off the bat. No,
if
we not softballing it in there at all or nothing.
Hey man, if wherever you feel like going, go.
Yeah, I just don't want to. I just don't want to paint us into a conversational corner. You know what I mean? Like,
That won't happen. I'm not worried.
all right, cool, 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 cool. Uh, yeah, it's just been like it's been crazy because for the first time I think in my entire life, like I feel agoraphobic. You know what I mean? Like legit. All right. One time I was supposed to be going to Braxton from Smith Taylor.
Yeah.
So I was supposed to be going to write some music with him, and I canceled because I was legitimately scared to leave the house. That has never happened to me in my entire life, dog. Like during the COVID shit, like of course I was a little bit scared to leave the house because it's like, damn, I don't want to get sick. But at the same time,
I'm gonna text TJ everyone and see if what happened here. Fortunately, this is our one of the first technical difficulties I've had. So hopefully we can get TJ back in here in a second.
We're back. All right, here I am. I'm all
Yeah.
right for sure, man. My fucking internet, bro, in this
Yeah.
house, crazy. All right, so where was I?
The last thing I heard from you was that you were legitimately scared to leave the house.
Oh yes, talking about my fears. Okay, well,
But
dog.
what I
No,
instantly wondered was, for what multiplicity of reasons?
uh, honestly, like I feel like it's like compounded. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, I can remember when they started shooting up movie theaters, right?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I would like go to the movies and with me and my sisters or whatever, and I'd just be like sitting there kind of like thinking like the entire movie, thinking like, all right, if it jump off, how we gonna get out? You know what I mean? And like, but that was like kind of a, kind of a back of my head, like in the back of my mind kind of thought. But then in recent times, and I'm also about to be 30. So just like finality is kind of like more of a unignorable idea for me. And then also like mortality is kind of real now. I mean, it's always been real, but like now it's like, dang, like it really can just be over for you. So I was scared to leave the house because I'm like, damn, like what if, I mean, anything can jump off and I could just like end up shot. You feel me? I just don't want to be a victim of, and not to sound trite, but I don't want to be a victim of fucking police brutality or a hate crime or no shit like that. And like that shit is happening to people like me, like a lot. And like now, it just seems like shit is more extreme. On top of that, it's like a lot of personal shit going on. So I think that all of these things, you wake up on your phone and there's bad news. Like the minute you wake up, it's somebody with some stats or some pictures or some fucking news that's like every day, dog.
Yeah.
So I've been scared to leave the house. I was supposed to go help my friend move, and I canceled. I was like, bro, I made up an excuse. I didn't say like, oh, I'm scared to leave, but that's what it was. I was shook, man.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, I definitely hear you on that. And like one of the perspective shifts that I've had during this time was like I realized how I didn't really take seriously the fear that a lot of Black Americans have about dying from racism related things.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
for
I
sure.
heard about it in music. I heard the news stories, but like, or even just making it out of a rough one's neighborhood alive at a certain age. Like I
Yeah,
didn't really take that as seriously as I do now.
yeah,
And like, through the different people's stories and like music I've listened to and just more education about what the numbers are like, I now like have this different understanding that for, a lot of Black Americans, like your mortality is way more in your face than for
straight
the
up.
average like middle class white person.
Straight up. It's like a lot of things are I mean I can only speak from my own perspective, but when I tell people about my upbringing and like the shit that I was exposed to at a very early age, I'm not trying to like have like I'm not trying to make this into trauma porn or anything like that. But because I also didn't think that it was traumatic until I started like telling people. I mean, I didn't I'm going to finish that idea, but
Yeah.
let me preface that idea by saying, like, I didn't start like having personal relationships with white people until I was about 17 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like before that, every white person I ever knew was peripheral or a teacher. You know what I'm saying?
Mm. Yeah.
And then like when I turned 17, that's when I started like actually like having personal relationships with white people and like navigating myself around white folks. So
How did that affect your perception of white people? Like once you started being having more interactions with them.
I mean, for me, it was like it was new. It was just like a new uh way of life. You know me personally, but for those of people who don't know me personally, like I love language. I love like, what I mean, slang and accents and understanding nuances of different cultures because I don't like to feel like a tourist at all. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Even when I'm like with somebody of a different race or whatever, I'm not about to, I'm not going like if I'm kicking it with a bunch of Mexicans in LA, I'm not about to don a Mexican accent, but I'm about to understand like what how they talk to each other, how they move, etc. So when I started kicking it with white folks, it was like, okay, I'm intrigued by just like the type of comedy. I was exposed to like a new sense of humor, different genres of music, tea, but strangely enough, like like you dig LaCroix exactly. Like I'm gonna come clean. Like my idea of tea before I started kicking it with white folks was like just that bullshit ass Lipton you get from Giant Eagle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
black tea from Giant Eagle.
Pretty weak
Like,
stuff.
nigga,
Yeah.
they had herbal tea and fucking peach tea, all types of shit. I'm like, oh y'all lit. You know what I'm saying?
By the way, man, that Lipton tea does not make me feel good. Like
It's trash.
I
It's
feel terrible.
trash.
I feel terrible if I drink that stuff.
Man, I thought I didn't like tea until, you know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
met a white person and started drinking tea.
Oh, here's
But
some jasmine.
right, I was like, what? What is that? You know what I mean? So like it was just like uh a new way of life. But when I would tell them about like my life and my upbringing and shit that I came from, they'd be like, yo, that's not regular. And like if you like it was crazy to me because my understanding of what I don't know, like the quintessential like hood lifestyle or whatever. Like my understanding of that, being a black person, relatively speaking, I'm like like relatively a privileged black dude. You know what I'm saying? Like I went to college and shit. Like I never had like my lights turned off. I never, what I mean, my mother didn't work two jobs, shit like that. Like you know how people say, well, my mom worked two. Like my mother is college educated. Uh, my grandmother owns property. My mother owns. Like I was relatively privileged. However, shit that like I was exposed to, just even by proxy of like my family members had people like, yo, what? You saw what? And I didn't, and again, like I'm saying, I didn't think it was crazy because people that I knew have seen way crazier shit than me or have been through way crazier shit than me. So I guess it just made me realize that like, maybe I haven't, maybe all black, maybe most black people have endured some sort of like really not normal situations, to put it lightly, and we just normalize.
Yeah.
You dig what
Yeah,
I'm
or
saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
uh,
Definitely.
Yeah.
Miami, they're
And
getting
it
some shit
it
out.
it speaks to like
Yeah,
it speaks to like what sort of inequality levels there are in the culture that we live in. Like
Yeah.
like the things that you just said were privilege, like owning property,
Mhm.
college education, you know.
Mhm.
Like yeah, on one hand we could look at those things as privileges, or we could look at them as like these are things that in modern society, like everybody who lives here should have the opportunity to access those things.
Right, but we don't.
We
We
don't.
don't.
We don't.
You know what I'm saying? Uh, like my uncle, not to like speak for anybody else. My uncle went to a high school that didn't have literally didn't have textbooks and shit. You know what I'm saying? My mother was a principal at Collinwood High School, and when she got there, there were kids there, and Collinwood is a predominantly, if not exclusively, black high school. Uh, but safely, I would say it's predominantly black. And uh, it was students there that was like 18 years old, thought they was about to graduate and had like freshman credits and were not near graduation. And nobody cared to inform these kids. Nobody cared to inform their parents. It was just like seeing that, seeing like what my mother was like witnessing and like working in education and working with black children. That also made me realize like, damn, I really did have a privileged education where like, you know, even though I wasn't catered to, people definitely wasn't about to let me be 18 years old with freshman credit. There would have been some sort of alternative presented to me at some point in my life, whereas these kids did not have that. And that's a lot of black people's reality, you know,
Yeah, with the
like a
school
lot.
being just the sheer lack of resources and the marginalizing of those communities, and just those schools not being treated as important as the schools in the more affluent communities.
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%. And then they like blame the kids and like blame the parents and like, I don't know. It's just a weird game. But I say all that to say, uh, I say all that to say, we were talking about fear initially, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and once I started like like being around all these other groups of people, I started to like realize that a lot of things that happened to me, a lot of conversations that were had, that I just was living in fear without even knowing that I was living in fear. You know what I mean? Like just stuff that I took for granted. My mother, I mean, every black person that's been on here and every black person you've ever talked to has probably told you about a conversation that they had when they first got their license. Their mother telling them, "Don't you have a bunch of people in your car," or "You can't do everything your white friends can do," or don't get pulled." Like just the whole conversation of like your interfaces with the law can be uh, detrimental to your life. I don't think that's like I don't think, I know, anecdotally speaking, that's not a normal conversation that most people that are not black have with their parents when they first get a license or start to venture out into the real world.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I think that's another one of those things that like a lot of white folks don't take that seriously, because
Yeah,
like you said, I didn't have that conversation with my parents,
yeah,
being like a white kid from South Euclid. When I got my license, that conversation didn't happen. But yeah, it's like, and yeah, every person in these sessions so far has talked about the the heightened tensions and the extra measures that they've taken throughout their lives to avoid any sort of confrontation with law authority, coming
yeah.
back to that fear thing of like how you've seen over and over and over in this country's history how the treatment of black Americans is worse and could easily become lethal in a
Hmm.
situation that would just be normal for an average.
Normal as fuck. That's what I'm saying. I can remember distinctly two of the worst whoopings I ever got in my life, bro. The first worst whooping I ever got in my life was I tried to steal some Pokemon cards from Blockbuster. And
Is this story in one of your songs?
I don't,
Okay.
maybe, but I tried to steal some Pokemon cards from Blockbuster and I got caught. Obviously, I was a dumb kid. I was like probably 7 or 8 years old, and my mother whooped the shit out of me. And then the second time I got like the one of the worst whoopings of my entire life was I was setting off firecrackers in a field down the street from my house, and somebody obviously called the police, and the police, brought me home and shit. And my mother like my mother went ham on me, bruh. And at the time, obviously being a kid, I'm like, damn, this is harsh to say the least. But now that I'm grown and you see cases like Tamir Rice and you see cases like Mike Brown and Trayvon Martin and shit, my mother was whooping me to instill the fear that like, bruh, stop playing with the law, bruh. You steal and the police come get you, they might kill you. So I'm gonna whoop you so you more afraid of me than you are of You feel me?
Yeah.
Whatever. It was the same like when I got brought home by the police. I think she was just like, even if that wasn't like in the front of her mind, I just think that black people are like, especially black mothers and black mothers of sons, are um like kind of, it's ingrained. It's like a cultural memory for us. Like, protect your children, uh, specifically your sons, from law enforcement, bro. You know what I'm saying? And that was her way of, and I kid you not, I never got brought home by the police ever again. That's not to say that I didn't have any run-ins with the police, but I was never uh like, I was so scared for my mom finding out that like the police fucked with me at all, that like, I never did nothing else that would elicit them to like bring me home or like take me to jail, not till I was grown. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And for me personally, man, like hearing these stories and like taking this thing seriously on a whole nother level of realizing that like, all these black families across America for generations have been living with this fear for their children, their families, themselves, their friends. It's like, as a white person now, like knowing that on a whole different level, like that makes me gives me a lot more motivation to want to like play an active part in changing this system, because I think that
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the most fucked up things about the state of the country right now and our history, is that
Mm-hmm.
if you're non-white, you have to live with this much greater degree of fear of
Mm-hmm.
possibly losing your life from a simple encounter.
And I think the black predicament in the United States is a little. I think it's a unique predicament. And Dave Chappelle said something, and I will never forget it. It was in a stand-up special or whatever. He was like, he just said he wasn't a fan of comparative struggle. Like, don't compare plight. So me saying that the black plight is unique is not a comparative statement, more so just like a statement. It's a
Yeah.
neutral statement in that, to where I'm not about to get into like again a trauma fucking contest and see who had it the worst. The Jews, the blacks, the Japanese, that's not but the black predicament in the Western hemisphere is unique in that we didn't migrate here. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were brought here against our will. We were subjugated and like made to work, and almost to like a lot of the times to death. We were sold, we were property, etc. And I think that like that is understated, you know? Like just for a second, think about, I mean, we could talk about the whole Western Hemisphere, but just think about the United States just by itself. You bring people across the Atlantic Ocean in the 1400s, right? This means there's no indoor plumbing, there's no electricity, there's no refrigeration, there's none of that, bro. This is probably a boat that fluctuates. There's no climate control inside of so this is a boat, right? A ship that uh has none of what we understand as livable, none of what we understand today as livable accommodations, and then take what we understand today as livable accommodations, subtract that by whatever number, and then subtract that by even larger of a number for the slave population that was on that bus, the enslaved Africans that were on the boat. They're shitting on each other, literally. They're pissing on each other, literally. They're throwing up on each other. They're having babies on top of each other. It's like I mean, this is months of travel. You know what I'm saying? From the Eastern Hemisphere to the Western Hemisphere. And then they survive that miraculously, somehow. You know what I'm saying? And then they're taken off of these ships and then forced into a life of servitude, wherein they're robbed of their name, They're robbed of their language, their entire cultural identity, their entire individual identity, and they're abused physically, sexually, mentally, emotionally, you name it, for hundreds of years. That alone is understated, bro. If you really think like that shit alone is understated. So like think of what that does to uh, a culture's like understanding of self. You know what I mean? That's why I say the Black plight is unique in the United States alone, but I think also just in the entire Western Hemisphere, because um, we don't have a cultural center. Like we don't have like like when you're going through that. Like, I mean, I can't speak with authority to this, but I have spoken to my friends that have immigrant parents and that were, you know what I'm saying, that are first generation, or like it's their first time. They are fresh off the boat, or they're second generation American, etc. Anecdotally speaking, I've talked to people, and what I find is that like having a cultural identity kind of like makes the racism and like the systemic targeting uh, a little bit easier to deal with, because you can like kind of go home and talk about white people in your own language and like have this like network of food and music and culture and like you have this network of stuff that is not defined by the people that were subjugated before you. Whereas when black people come home, we and not to I don't want to start like sound militant or whatever, but our language, our religion, uh, our music, everything that defines our identity was either um, like redistributed to us by white Americans, or um, just imposed upon us, like religion and language. You know what I mean? So like that's just like the, it's like uh, it's like being kidnapped and like living with your captor for 15 years, and just now you are who they say you are, you know. So I don't know why that was tangential. I don't know why I started talking about that. What did you say that made me say that? Wait, hold on. I can't hear you.
All right, sorry. Yeah, I don't remember either, but I think that, the explanation that you gave there, man, is so crucial for like white folks to understand, to look at how society has moved forward, like post abolition of slavery, and like why things have gone down in the way that they have for Black Americans since then, is because that was the starting place.
Yeah.
Like I had a history teacher in college who broke it down for me, broke it down for us in the way that you just described. And like I remember when I was hearing about that, I was like, damn, like it wasn't, I never thought about it that way. That wasn't taught
Yeah.
to me in school. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, slavery, and then we passed some laws, and then everyone was free, and that was a while
Yeah. Right.
and when that description came, I remember leaving the classroom that day and being like, wow.
Yeah.
And imagine,
That.
my family coming from generations of that, and how I would feel just knowing what my ancestors only several generations back went through, and how they were completely severed from their way of life. And yeah, it was a deliberate part of the racist power culture here to completely destroy the identity of the enslaved to make them enslaved. So you
It's
think about
crazy.
trying to emerge and build something of yourself in a society when you're coming from that, like where do you even start?
Where do you even start? And then where do you even like? I mean, I'm glad that this conversation, and I mean like on a worldwide level or a national level, I'm glad that people are starting to consider this with more critical thinking. But it's like, that's why I feel weird about what's going on. I feel weird that I even feel weird because like I've been black, you know what I'm saying, forever. Since I was born, you know. And these are conversations that like black people have been having since, you know, maybe before this, but you know, at least since Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and them was doing a thug thizzle. So it's just like it's wild to me that like it has taken even this long for like that bit of consideration to even come like start to happen. It's also wild to me that people don't understand like why, you know, we are in the positions that we are in as far as incarceration and uh literacy and, you know, even down to just like our priorities, you know what I mean. It's just hard that people don't understand that.
What would you say about the priorities thing? I think those 3 points right there would be really good things to discuss. So you said incarceration, literacy, and priorities. So like
Yeah.
what starting with like the priorities thing, like what more could you go into there?
Okay. Like all right. How do I say this without like misspeaking? It's like, take somebody like my mom for instance, right? My mother and my grandmother and shit, right? So mama, again, like I said, my mother was fortunate enough to like, you know, be raised by homeowners. My grandfather, I mean, they live with, you know, my mom went to Collinwood and shit, but you know, that doesn't mean like it's nice houses in the hood and shit. So my mother like had a nice house, Christian upbringing, you know what I'm saying? My grandmother before that didn't have such a nice house with such a clean upbringing. So my grandmother like kind of overcompensated in her life to just make things stable for my mother. So my grandmother's priorities were uh were go to get good grades, go to school and get a good job and have a nice house and have your kids in nice clothes. It's just like priorities that like are kind of a given. Just make sure your lights are always on, or like make sure your house is always clean, or make sure your kids' hair is always done and shit like that. Very simple priorities, which influence my mother's life decisions. Because you know, my mother always talks about how she wanted to like pursue music and like architecture, but she didn't. She pursued like a safe career in education because like it was just, you know, it was safe, right? Now, just already in talking about my mother and my grandmother, like that's like kind of worlds beyond where a lot of people even get, because a lot of people get stuck like where my grandmother is or before where my grandmother is. It's just like the priority is to make sure your rent is paid, your kids are well dressed and fed, and you know what I mean, your lights are never off or you always got growth. Like you'll see like single mothers in like East Cleveland like posting shit like their kids like just draped up in polo and like Nikes and shit like that. They live in East Cleveland. They don't have anything to their name except, you know, their bi-weekly paychecks or whatever, but their kids are immaculate, fresh to death. I mean, I have cousins like this. And the people wonder why, you know, we're like this, but it's kind of just like, again, like trying to find that identity, trying to find that um trying to find like a sense of self in the fact that you take care of your business. Can't nobody knock you off your square type shit. You know, there's not a lot of room for like esoteric self-discovery and shit
Right.
like that.
Yeah, because it's
You get what I'm saying?
what I'm really hearing from that is like it's this point of pride to meet basic needs,
Mhm.
especially for one's family. And the
Mhm.
reason that developed is because just trying to live and exist as a black person in America, you were met with so many more challenges to just meet your basic needs.
And I think it has a lot to do with anti-blackness. I think it actually has more to do with anti-blackness, and a lot of people exhibit anti-black behavior and they don't even realize it. It's like uh it's the same idea when niggas used to wear like conks and shit and like the finger waves when back when, if you look at like Little Walter and Muddy Waters back when they was wearing like processed hair. It's this whole idea of I don't want to look like a slave. I don't want to look like a sharecropper. I want to look like I have money. And who looks like they have money? White people. And what do white people that have money have? Houses, cars, nice shoes, nice, like always have, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's like this idea of like presenting yourself as someone who is above their perceptions, you know?
right,
And that's just like it's a cultural theme. It's a cultural like scar that that has happened across generations, unchecked, unlike, what I'm saying, untreated, unchecked anti-blackness. And I'm using that term neutrally because I don't think that like black people that exhibit these types of priorities, which is a lot, especially in my like anecdotally, I don't think that these people hate themselves. I just think that they haven't been ever told that like it's okay to be you.
right.
It's okay to like present. It's okay to be broke. You feel me? Like it's not okay, but it's okay that you're broke and you don't have to present this, thing. But I don't know, like it's like a chicken or the egg kind of thing. It's like a chicken or the egg
No, I get what you're
conversation.
saying, and
You know
I
what I
think
mean?
what comes from is the fact that, like, you could say that black people as a whole have never been made to feel welcome w- here in America. Like the
As them,
history,
as ourselves, as our,
yeah,
we've
as
never been.
yourselves.
Yeah, yeah.
And like, I was thinking of, one of the things I was reading about a lot a couple weeks ago was the Tulsa massacre,
Hmm.
and like reading into the implications of that, of where you had a group of black Americans who set up business and were doing well, and were reaching that status from in their own community and their own hard work, and like, and we saw that very violently white people were not okay with that, to the
Yeah,
point where they literally killed a ton of people and burned that district to the ground. Like,
yeah,
so you think of the type of traumatic scarring that occurs from something like that. Like, I can't think of a worse egregious offense to letting a group of people know that you don't want them there. That's
yeah.
like literally as far as you can take some a violent action of letting someone know you don't want them there.
It's crazy.
So like, when you consider things like that, America's history is full of stuff like that. It's like, yeah, there that subtle anti-blackness thing makes its way in, of like, you want to appear.
The not so subtle anti-black. It's not so subtle. It's very in your face. It's like, even examples, like topical examples of anti-blackness would be. I mean, I'm sure like none of this is news, but um, a popular example of anti-blackness is like twerking, right? Like the twerk craze. Niggas been twerking and been calling it twerking since about the 70s, 80s. You understand what I'm saying? I remember vividly being at a school dance in like the 8th grade, and that was the thing, like to get some twerk. Like, oh shit, like I'm getting twerked on, right? But like if you would get shut down. You would get suspended from school for sexual misconduct. You understand what I'm saying? And this happened up until what 20, whenever Miley Cyrus came out and started twerking and it was cute, right? And then like just like that, white girls start doing it, and now there's twerk classes, and uh you feel me, like it's all this like, so it's like that's a very superficial example of anti-blackness, but that in and of itself is like You feel me? Anti-black. So it's not that subtle. It's been in our face forever. Uh, the fact that like, the fact that like, you be hard pressed to meet a black person that can't code switch. You know what I'm saying? That can't like that. You be hard pressed to meet a black person that don't got a white voice. You dig what I'm saying? Because it's like, if we talk like how we actually talk, then like you won't be taken seriously. So it's like this whole idea that you have to exist in two worlds from the jump. And that's why you'll see somebody have like seemingly fucked up priorities, because they're existing in two worlds. They have to present to like the world that like they have shit under control, and then their actual life where they're scrambling paycheck to paycheck to pay bills. They're finessing the system to get like, breaks. All of these things are happening underneath the surface, but you still have to keep up appearances. So like that's the one. That's just something that that's something that's hard for me to understand why people don't understand. And then the incarceration thing, it's hard for me to understand why people don't understand that either, because it's like niggas that say, well, don't break the law, but it's like, you feel me? Clearly, that's not a stipulation to whether or not you go to jail as a black person. Like we've seen cases of people being in jail for 20 plus years and didn't commit didn't commit the crime. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's crazy. And we just like let that rock as a society. That's nuts. You know what I'm saying? And then like the whole premise of the prison system is just to like reinstate like slavery and shit like that. I mean, this is again not news, but it's crazy that now in 2020, when we've known all of these facts forever, that like now these, you know, uh, they're finally like at least even acknowledging it.
Dude, I think a lot of white folks don't know that like the
Yeah,
prison system was literally created to extend slavery and call it something else.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of white people across America that are just now waking up to that fact and and there's a lot who are still in denial of it too. But all you have to do is look at the history of the policies.
Or you know what I'm saying? Google, why type? I don't know. It's like look on YouTube or some shit. But like I will say, I think that it's part self-preservation, because to acknowledge like the severity of the treatment of blacks in America, like to acknowledge that is to acknowledge that the white way of life is completely built upon like a corrupt foundation, you know? Like white to oversimplify and like make a soundbite or a headline, whiteness in America exists 100% at the expense of black people. You understand what I'm saying? And I mean that even today. Like if white people, history books, schools, etc., if they were to 100% acknowledge how crazy the last few centuries have been, um, then morally they would not be able to continue to live how they live. You know what I'm saying? Like it would have to change. And I don't think that I think that's easier said than done. And I think that like, yeah, that's it. That's just easier said than done. You feel me?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, one one thing that I think about a lot of my experience compared to, other white friends that I have is like lack there's a lot of white people in America that have a complete lack of proximity to anyone other than other white people.
For sure. Oh yeah,
And
that's
like
very true.
with growing up in, right on the edge of South Euclid and Cleveland Heights and being in a really diverse church and going to Brush and Memorial, like I was both around a lot of black people and had a lot of black friends and like experienced that different life firsthand. And I remember my best friend Jordan Tisdale growing up across the street from him,
Yeah.
and watching Chappelle's show at his house. And his dad would
Mhm.
watch it with us. And then, like, after the sketches, he'd turn to me and be like, "Hey, Matthew, so this is what he's really talking about."
Yeah,
And
like Scoop giving you, yeah.
yeah, and I would be like, "Whoa."
Mhm.
And this conception over time was built of how it really is way different
Mhm.
to be black in America, and how much how unbalanced the scales were, right?
And to that point, just to
Yeah,
that point of like proximity, just like I think that it's noteworthy to say that most middle to upper middle class white people that know a black person or black people and interface with them on a day to day or frequently, those black people are anomalies. And that's kind of a crazy thing to say to somebody uh that like most of the people that you meet from a demographic are an anomaly, because like the definition of an anomaly is something that is unusual. But to a lot of white people, like the type of black people that they know are anomalies. You know what I'm saying? So you might know as a white person that had a middle class to upper middle class uh background, you might know several anomalies.
right.
You
Yeah,
understand what I'm saying?
exactly. Yeah.
And like,
I also
and
understand that too. Is like,
yeah,
yeah,
by anomaly, for those that don't, by anomaly I mean, like I was saying at the intro, like I can be considered like an anomaly. Like again, I have two generations of my family, my grandmother and my mother, that both own property. My mother has a master's degree. You understand? I have a college education. My sisters have college education. Like that's not normal for black people, and it should be normal, but it's not. You know what I'm saying? Because if I outside of my like nuclear, not even outside of my nucleic family, because when I talk about like my parents are obviously divorced, but when I talk about my father and uh like my father's side of the family, and then furthermore my mother's side of the family outside of my mother and my grandmother, then that none of what I said before is true. Like none of them own, except my dad owns property. But I mean, not to put my dad's business out there, but I mean, what type of how my father got his money growing like in his younger years, which is also true for a lot of people's fathers that have black fathers. They was hustling out here. A lot of us. So a lot of us have normalized drug dealing. A lot of us have normalized like ill-gotten fun. I'm ranting, but I'm just saying that outside of like me, the more statistical, like me and and the people like in this house, the more like quintessentially statistic things that you hear about like black people, that is true for most. I mean, as another soundbite, I say like every black person that is lives in the suburbs currently has one foot in the ghetto, at least. You know what I'm saying? Like we're one like property line removed from the ghetto. You feel me? Like
yeah, yeah,
that's just the way it is. You know what I mean?
yeah. And I think most, the majority of white Americans don't have much of a concept of what you just explained. I didn't until I was an adult, and like I grew up in a pretty diverse community and diverse school, but I didn't fully understand what you just explained until a lot of education took place.
Yeah. And a
So
lot of people
I'm
don't ever get that.
right,
A lot
yeah.
of people
I'm
don't ever
I'm
get that.
hoping that like more of America is seeing now just how unequal things are, and
Hmm.
how much that's due to policy, to racist power structure, and how like it's all our duty now to educate ourselves on what those things are and take action to make it more equal.
Even on a superficial level, I think that a huge problem with why say uh slavery is so easily glossed over is because we ignore minutia when it comes to like explaining what that was to kids. You know what I'm saying? The minutia is important in terms of, you know, as far as this topic is concerned, because you kind of have to, something that is seemingly so far removed, like a white person or a non-black person cannot even like fathom the you know, sort of the ideas behind this type of shit. So in order to like drive the point home, like what happened to you and like what needs to continue to happen, is somebody needs to explain the minutia of that shit. What happened on the boat? What happened, you know, day to day, like anecdotes, shit like this,
Yeah.
you know?
Otherwise,
Like,
you can take a word like slavery and you can paint whatever definition you want out of that, which the definition that gets painted in mainstream education is one that's not that bad. When
yeah,
in reality, like the minutia of slavery was brutal.
brutal.
And those brutal details, it's like in church, you know, when they want to instill that guilt in you and they give you this bloody recounting of Christ's crucifixion. Like they
Yeah,
go into deep detail about how horrific that was, right?
yeah,
That didn't happen about slavery in school.
never. Never. And I mean, and I guess like the theme of this is like, I think my way that I like to interpret all of this, and like the way that I like to sort of reach people, because I spent a lot of time with white people. And I think that white people are really, from what I understand about white people are really concerned with like identity. Like white people love telling people who they are, where they're from, what they've seen, what they've experienced, etc. So when it comes to like me trying to like sort of let white people understand like where I'm coming from as a black person and where black people are coming from, I like to like talk about identity, because that's something that y'all kind of have. It's like a privilege that y'all have. You feel me? So like another um sort of thing to consider when you talk about like the brutality of slavery and even sharecropping and even what came after that. Like I have a great great grandmother. She was born in 1909 and she lived until 2009. Right? She lived to be 100 years old. Crazy. Her name was Alma. Alma Boss. I knew her very well. I grew up with her. She, you know what I mean? Like she was my great grandmother. She got to see like me go to college. She went from being working in somebody's house to seeing there be a black president, right? So she saw like she lived on this earth for 100 years. She saw a lot of shit, a lot of shit, right? Now, don't be alarmed, but the knowing her and knowing what she went through, she was raped when she was 15 years old by the the man that she worked for. It was a white man she worked for in Macon, Georgia. She was raped at 15, and she gave birth to my great grandmother, a product of rape. And then my grandmother was born, and then my mother was born, and then I was born. So like hearing story, like trying to find yourself in all of this, and then like you hear a story of like from her mouth, from my own great mouth. She told me the story out of her own mouth. You know what I'm saying? It's like knowing that, like, how does a person reconcile? How does first of all, how does she reconcile that? You dig what I'm saying? How does my great grandmother reconcile that, knowing that she's a product of a rape, a statutory rape at that, and then like knowing that my entire bloodline is sort of smudged by this idea that like my not even this idea, this act, this brutal act that happened to my great great grandma. That's like a crazy fucking thing to cope with. Like it's crazy. I cannot express to you how, like, I'm about to, all right. I'm sorry, but like, I cannot express to you. There honestly isn't really a way for me to express to you how nuts that is for me. Not even to mention how nuts it probably was for Busy. We called her Busy Bunny. Not to mention how nuts it was for Busy Bunny and my grandmommy who comes from that. That's nuts for me. And then it's nuts for me to. It's just a lot of shit that's like nuts for me. Even down to the fact that like The only reason why I'm allowed to do anything, only reason why I'm allowed to play music, date white girls, have white friends, read, write, do anything, is because white people agreed to let me do those things. And you know that, I'm not religious, but you know that like religious phrase, like the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Well, fuck, if they give it to you, they can take that shit from you, and they are, bro. And that's why I'm fucking scared to leave the fucking house, because like I'm there's already been like this thin veil of like uh uh this thin veil of like security that, oh, I'm an American citizen that has rights and blah blah blah. It's been the veil is being lifted up, and like my worst fears are being realized, in that white people are no longer agreeing on the fact that like black people should have human rights. They don't agree on that anymore. Therefore, you can without batting an eyelash shoot a 12-year-old boy out of a police car, or kneel on a man's neck for 10 minutes, virtually 10 minutes. You know what I'm saying? Or inject a black man with ketamine enough to stop his heart, or like it just. So I know that's an offshoot of what we were talking about, but I just, that's why I'm scared. I'm like scared to like leave the house, bro. It's because like I said, the only reason why I'm allowed to do anything is because white people agree that it's okay. And now it feels like, in a very real way, that they don't agree on that anymore.
Mm.
You feel me?
Yeah. I would even like, I mean, first of all, man, like thank you for sharing that honestly, because I think that's what a lot of us need to hear right now, and how real that fear is for Black America as a whole. But I would go one step further to say that, like, I think the white people agreeing that Black Americans should have those things was an illusion to begin with.
An illusion.
And
They shouldn't have even had that authority. You
and
know
it,
what I mean?
exactly, yeah, it was
Yeah.
a legislative appeasement,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now we're realizing that as a nation, as a culture, and now it's time to like do away with that paradigm altogether, of
Mm-hmm.
like, there should be no gatekeepers anymore. It should be recognizing humans as humans with fundamental rights to have lives of where their basic needs are met, and
Mm-hmm.
opportunity is equal, and freedom of expression and culture and religion, and not having to assimilate, and not having to have a white voice in order to be taken seriously, and just all the shit. We're just now starting to come to terms with this as a country, to see how it was that allowing you spoke of was an illusion to begin with, and it's
Illusion.
time to actually make it happen now. And the
Yeah.
more like the majority that cares, the more that we understand that, then we can start to make more informed decisions when it comes to voting legislators and being a part of how policy gets created,
Mm-hmm.
and in the way that we see other people who are outside of the majority.
Yeah. I think that because like this is something that like I think it's in my coding to do, sort of as a black person, is to look for the positive and shit. Because it's like a survival
Right.
thing. But I think that one good thing about now, the ubiquity of this message, that like this the ubiquity of this racial tension, I think, just like how you mentioned that, you grew up across the street from the Tisdales, and they taught you things, and we acknowledge that like most white people by proximity never even have to consider race relations in America, just because of the privilege that they have. I think that now the ubiquity of this tension is making it so it's like forcing parents, like people that are our age that have kids, or people that are slightly older than us that have school age kids, like white people are now kind of forced to talk to their kids about race relations in the country, whereas they might not have been uh before. You know what I'm saying? Because who doesn't have Instagram? Everybody got Instagram. Kids, grown-ups, every so just like we seeing all these messages and all this bad news and shit, this white kids seeing all this bad news and shit, asking their mom like, yo, what is going on? And their mom has to explain that shit to them. However their moms are explaining that shit to them, the fact that the conversation is even being had kind of like gives me some sort of glimmer of like, well, maybe there is something good about all this shit that's going on, you know. But more more immediately, bro, let's put it like put the kibosh on the bullshit, man. Like let it can a nigga live, man. You know what I'm saying? Like what's happening, bro?
Yeah.
I'm just jogging.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
You know what I'm saying?
That was one that, in the last few weeks, man, there's been a lot of me personally like examining of my own privilege, like just in when I'm just living my life, right? Doing the things that I like to do. And I've thought on numerous occasions of just those ordinary things, how I might be significantly more on edge or afraid for my life
Mm-hmm.
if I was a black person,
Mm-hmm.
in doing things like running, in doing things like going climbing in the backwoods of West Virginia. I would never do that if I was a black person. I'd be
Hey,
terrified.
remember when we was driving to Texas and we
Yeah.
had to stop in like the middle of nowhere in Arkansas,
Yep. Yep.
and me and Jaron was just like,
Yeah.
yo,
Let's make it quick.
let's make this snappy. Yeah,
Yeah.
like shit like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about that stuff constantly, man. And like the more I do, it's just crazy that that level of inequality is just such an immediate reality right now. And like it should not be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely should not be that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, as ugly as all of this is right now, man, I think this is one of the first actual reconciliation points in America's history for
For
like
sure.
for facing things.
Yeah, catastrophe like it's like I mean, you know, I don't get me to like butchering like the philosophy, but basically like you can't have radical change without catastrophe.
Right.
There has to be like an unignorable problem in order for a solution to take place. It's a shame that's the case, but I mean I think that's just human nature. So
Yeah.
it's pretty sick that it's cool. But in the meantime though, you know what I'm saying, I'm gonna just go ahead and like stay safe. You did
Yeah.
as safe as I possibly can.
I feel you, man. And to like, this is one parallel that I've been drawing a lot, especially in the yoga community, is like what you just said mirrors how personal transformation works. Like before we get to the point where we can really face like the dysfunction and the negative patterning and all the messed up stuff that's there in order to make it better, it's like you have to hit this catastrophic rock bottom
Mm-hmm.
in order to start facing that and growing personally.
Yeah,
So I hope we're at that point, you know.
yeah.
One thing before we wrap up, man, one thing I really wanted to ask you about tonight is like, you know, with your experience, how does all this affect you as an artist, and how does it affect your artistry? Um, in whatever way you wanted to talk about that, how you feel like others perceive you, what pressure you feel, to how you need to put yourself out there in a certain way, or whatever, just because you have that platform to speak and express yourself and these things about your experience, like how does this all tie into your artistry?
Like I said before, like I've been black. You know what I'm saying? So like my art has always sort of reflected um the Black experience just because it reflects my experience, and my experience is a Black experience, not the Black experience, but a Black experience. And in that, there are some quintessential tropes, but there are also just like, and those quintessential tropes filtered through like my lens is where my art comes from. So does that affect the content of my work? No. Has it affected the output of my work? No. um but I think what it has done is people that are fans of me and that like listen to my shit, I think now that people can like listen to my shit with like like from a different uh perspective, because they have like they're informed by something different now. So whereas you might have thought I was just talking about bitches and money, you might understand that when slaves were working out in the field and they were singing blues songs and singing about like a woman that did them wrong, the woman was code for the slave master, the overseer. That like whenever you hear a blues song about a woman that did a man wrong, sometimes it's about a woman, but a lot of times they use the code that's coded. And that like, this is, I'm not talking about women, I'm talking about oppression in like the form of like a broken heart or some shit like that. Shit like stuff like that. Like you can now start to like listen to my shit from a more, from a not a more informed, but just like a different perspective. uh as far as like pressure from people, I have gotten some like pressure from people to like be more vocal and all that shit. But to that again, I say I've been Black since 1990, bro. You know what I'm saying? Since August 4th, 1990, I've been Black, bro. So like, just again, my existence. I got dreadlocks and tattoos and shit. Like, and I mean, I got like natty dread. So like, my existence is a protest and like kind of a testament to like my Blackness and shit, and how proud I am of my Blackness. You feel me? So like, fuck what you talking about. If you feel like I should be more vocal, then that's how you feel. You
Yeah.
feel me?
Yeah, it's, when Nathan was talking last week, and I asked him kind of a similar thing about his artistry and how this is all played into that. And yeah, he expressed like, he's like, I just want to be. I want
Right.
freedom to just be as I am,
Right.
and have the space to do that and be heard by whoever that resonates with.
Right.
And yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, I feel the same way, man. As like, as artists, like, that is our like fundamental right, is
Yeah.
all we're really asking for, all you are asking for, is the space to be as you are.
Yeah. And if ever I get like a position of like, more influence, and I just have more, my celebrity has more leverage as that shit begins to happen, then what I'm saying, I will use that as leverage to further, you know, the cause of my folks. You feel me? Until then, though, the only leverage I have is what I make, and what I've been making has always been, music from and of a Black perspective. That's all I can do right now.
Well, any closing remarks, man? Any other things you want to throw out there, or you feel like white folks might need to hear or acknowledge right now?
Salt and pepper is not seasoning. No, just wait. I'm just
Oh my god.
Oh man. Oh.
The only thing that gets is
You already know, man. No, I'm just playing. I think we said it all, man. I think we said it all we can, all we gonna say.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, but so as we conclude, man, just thank you so much, dude, because this is, I see these kinds of conversations as the way that we can start to shift culture,
Mhm.
and developing capacity to listen, to really consider how to be able to look out into the world wherever you live and just acknowledge the fact that we cannot fundamentally understand everyone else's experience. The
Without
only thing
talking to
we
him
can
at
assume
least.
is that everybody's suffering in some capacity.
Yeah.
And so when we really feel that, it's like we can have some sort of authentic compassion. And that compassion at this point in history should propel us into action that creates more equality for everyone.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm just going to wrap this up with another just short meditation here. So for everyone who is still with us, you can go ahead and close your eyes. So it's important after, hearing each other that we don't just jump right to the next thing, but we can take a moment to let all this sink in. So take a few deeper breaths. And when we're in this still and quieter space, perhaps we could be inspired to contemplate what actions we can take to create more equality. We could see it as our duty to act to create more equality. So we'll take one more deep breath. And open the eyes. And the last thing I'll ask you, man, is when's the next when you drop in the next song?
As soon as I get this, as soon as I get this grant, I'm waiting to hear back some information about some grant money. So, you know what I'm saying? Stay tuned, baby.
Nice. Well, for everyone who's tuning in, either on here or YouTube, follow Peachcurls on Instagram. TJ is always posting interesting and hilarious content. A lot of your stories, man, are like some of the best comedy out there.
Thank you very much.
And musically, like and anything you've put out, man, like I already covered in the beginning here, has always resonated with me, and I just appreciate your authenticity as an artist, and that continues to inspire me, and I'm sure it inspires a lot of people, man, to be them in their artwork and in their expression. So
Thank you.
keep doing you, man.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, well, I'll catch you soon. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a good one.
All right, peace.